Welcome to A State of Mind. This is Julian Royce. I bow with reverence and respect to the space within your heart, a space of truth and of caring and of being human. And this is the space which allows all these words to be heard. I am recording this a few days before Christmas, and I want to wish everyone listening a very happy holidays. And I wanted to share a message that there's no need to be any way other than how you are. Really, there's space for it all here. Sometimes around the holidays, or maybe often, we get the message that we should be happy, but we don't need to be any certain way. We don't need to be happy because it's a certain time of year, and we don't need to be unhappy because it's a certain time of year. This time right now, whatever it is something new, and that's worth appreciating. I am recording this back here in Boulder, Colorado. As I shared in the last episode, I got to spend some time in Tulum, Mexico, where I got to go on a yoga and meditation retreat, and I continue to reflect on that retreat. And one of the ways into meditation that the teacher Christopher Wallace offered was to simply ask the question, what is the quality of your experience before you think of it? What is the quality of your experience before you overlay conceptual thought upon it? And for me, that really helps just carry me into a non-conceptual state of meditation. I think at this point in my journey with meditation, it's rarely about acquiring some new information as much as my intellect and my ego likes that. But in the actual practice itself, it's more about reminders, right? Avenues back. Back to what? Back to presence. Back to a space in which you are not identified with your mind. Another one that I got from that retreat that I really like is, what would it be like if you regarded the thoughts and judgments of your mind just like the sound of the wind? And that one really has helped me to, in the moment, disidentify with what's going on in the mind. That we can just allow the mind to be the mind. There's a new song with East Forest and Ram Dass, in which Ram Dass is saying, let the thoughts and judgments of the mind just be the thoughts and judgments of the mind. In today's podcast, I am speaking with an old friend of mine, Stephen VanNortwick. I went to high school with him, and for the last 3 years in a row now, we've recorded a conversation for this podcast on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, because I'll go home and see family that I have in Raleigh, North Carolina for Thanksgiving, and then see him that Sunday after. And this was a fun conversation. We cover a lot of topics. He is an amateur mycologist, but he's one of the people that I've had on the podcast who honestly is not trying to sell anything. He doesn't even have his own website or anything like that. It's really just this human-to-human conversation. We're reflecting on the year, on the state of the world. We are talking about things like mycology and the environment, as well as something I've been thinking about more and more lately, which is decentralized networks of intelligence. And I think that relates directly to the meditation instructions at the start of this podcast episode. And it relates directly to the ancient spiritual Buddhist yogic teachings we've all heard that blame our quote ego for the source of so much of our suffering. As a really simple way to understand what that is pointing to is it's just pointing to the fact that we don't need to identify with our mind. Identifying with our mind is quote unquote ego in the way that it's often used in spiritual teachings or in translations of Buddhist and yogic texts. Maybe a more precise way to say it would be self-clinging, whatever we identify with. But practically speaking, what most of us are identifying with are our minds, our thoughts and our emotions and our stories and our memories of the past, our hopes and fears about the future and all that stuff. And so if you can take time during your day to, and it doesn't have to be a formal practice, but to find some way to find space from that, to drop into the bigger space in which those thoughts and emotions can arise, they can be there and they can dissolve, and to stop identifying with them. There's just so much immense benefit from doing that, not only for your own health, but honestly speaking for the health of those around you. And the other day I got to attend a house concert hosted by my friend Rosh, who started something called the Blind Cafe The Blind Cafe is this amazing experience in which they create an atmosphere of total darkness, and they serve you a gourmet meal, and they have amazing music, and all these sensory experiences, but without any vision, without any light whatsoever. And this house concert was not that. It was not a Blind Cafe experience, but I think I will have Raj on the podcast sometime in the near future to share about his journey in creating that and sharing it with the world. But this was just a beautiful gathering of musicians and beautiful music, and I took a recording of one song in particular that just blew me away, and honestly I've been listening to it, maybe once a day since I recorded it. It is called Through the Dark by Begay with John Sousa on guitar, and it's just written by and about this time of year in which the days are the shortest and the nights are the longest, and I think it's so beautiful and also profound. So I'm going to play that song, and then we'll have the conversation with Stephen. So enjoy.
Sweetly from the brightest star beams I hold these prayers inside my hands, and deep down in my bones I answer the call. I see through it all. I won't go astray. With you I'll stay, and we'll light the candle. We won't let it burn out as we make our way through the dark, through the dark, through the dark, through the dark. So weave me sweetly from the brightest star beams I hold these prayers above my head, and deep down in my bones I answer the call. I won't let you fall. Together we'll rise through it all. We'll go through the doorway. There's no turning back. There's nothing we lack as we move through the dark, through the dark, through the dark, through the dark. So weave me sweetly from the brightest star beams. Oh, weave me sweetly from the brightest star beams. Oh, weave me sweetly from the brightest star beams. Oh, weave me sweetly from the brightest star beams. Oh, weave me sweetly.
That was Through the Dark by Begay with John Sousa. And without further ado, I bring you Stephen VanNortwick. I'm here today with my friend Stephen. Stephen, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, welcome back again.
It's our annual tradition.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah. Can I call you a mycologist?
Yeah, you could say amateur mycologist. That'd be more appropriate.
Amateur mycologist.
Yeah. That's that'd be a more appropriate title, I guess you would say, because it's more of a passion and love versus a professional endeavor at this point right now. And there's a few universities that offer mycology as a more advanced program, but there's not very many of them.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a few. NC State has a Center for Fungal Integrated Research, but it's more about, I'd say, like biology driven. It's a lot more about like molecular structures and looking at things under the microscope and things like that, as opposed to someone who's just out foraging, identifying, collecting, that kind of thing, or cultivating at home in your garden or whatnot. Yeah, that's kind of a different approach to it too. So there's all different kinds of mushroom knowledge that's out there, Yeah,
I get the sense of it's being studied more now, but it's a little, like it's not studied as much as maybe it deserves. People don't realize that. It's this huge subject that doesn't get like a bunch of fancy research dollars.
That's a really good way to put it. I agree. I think there's a lot of, that's what is really interesting and inspiring to me about mycology to begin with is, you're exactly right, there's not a ton of people doing that kind of research, but there is more now, with things, the way information spreads and the way that knowledge spreads and really good social media campaigns. Like if you look, have you seen that movie Fantastic Fungi?
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't watched it yet. I want to watch that. Yeah,
I think it came out like this year or last year. I can't remember. They filmed it last year maybe, or somebody's been working on it for several years, and then they the production value of that with like really good images and really good camera work and really good graphics really helps educate people and get them inspired to kind of go out and do some of these things on their own. So I think there's more people that are turning on to mycology in that area of science.
Maybe this isn't exactly mycology, but it's certainly related. My brother he was studying chemical engineering in the University of Iowa, and he was studying using growing organisms, I think mostly bacteria, that could help clean up like oil after an oil spill.
Oh yeah.
But that could also produce oil as like a byproduct.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of that's
like, see, what I think one of the huge things in terms of our environment is like a huge disaster that environmentalists will get very depressed about, and anyone who thinks about it can get super depressed about, is like all the plastic filling up the world that in theory can't be broken down into particles beyond a certain size, and these little tiny like modules of plastic will live for like thousands and thousands of years. But I wonder if life will evolve in such a way that it will be able to process it and speed that process up, and I think it will. Because
that's really interesting.
Because otherwise, we're like, and this plastic is actually entering into our bodies, through the food we eat. Because fish eat little bits of plant matter that have it, and it travels up the food chain. And there's like a number of chemicals like that too that are infiltrating our world on bigger and bigger levels, and it's really scary and disturbing. But I hope that science and like the natural processes can evolve to help filter some of this stuff out eventually.
Yeah. Well, the use of plastic. We use plastic for everything. Everything's wrapped, and But there's some really good things that are being done, like what your brother, like the kind of things your brother is doing, with myco-remediation, with soils and things like that. You would be amazed at the things that can happen. Like fungus can break down plastic in certain cases.
See, that's amazing.
There are plastics that can be broken down by fungus. I don't want to say 100% of all plastics, right? I don't think that's safe to say. But like, as far as things that sometimes go into the soil versus the ocean, there's a lot of cases where eventually, fungus does take over. That breaks down that organism in some way or another, and it goes back into the soil. So there is a lot of information and science that's being done for not only soaking up toxins and soaking up chemicals from the earth that we don't want, but also turning that and composting it into something that's of a use of energy.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting so source of mushrooms, source of energy, source of good compost. NASA's looking into that kind of stuff with the use of the things that mushrooms can do as far as packaging and insulation. Yeah. I mean, it can really, like, the sky's the limit. You know, you can really think of anything.
I was going to say, I think the answer to a lot of environmental problems will be not in trying to use technology to outsmart them, but that in using our science and technology to help accelerate the natural processes that already need to happen to bring things back into balance.
Yeah.
And I think if we can see things from that level more fundamentally, it would actually help our efforts to help the world be much deeper and go farther and actually help things. Because, like, a lot of the efforts that people make to help the environment end up making it worse. Sure. Because it's human meddling in a system that's too complex for anyone to actually understand.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue I take with, like, electric vehicles right now. Is, like, everyone's... That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Is, like, we're really pushing electric vehicles, and, like, Tesla, right? We were just talking about Tesla. Mm-hmm. You know, how many, like, where all those, you know, those really heavy and special metals coming from, in the way that they're being, like, the.
I was listening to this guy who's a PhD from Columbia University, and he was studying economics and environmental policy, and he studied biofuels when he was earning his PhD, and he started off thinking that this was this great thing, this good technology. It was promoted as a green technology that would help the world, and so he wanted to study it to help make the world a better place. And while studying it, he realized that biofuels, like ethanol that we put in our cars that are just made from corn, is the stupidest thing ever. And that the whole thing makes no sense, and that it's actually making all the problems it's meant to address that much worse. So he dropped out of teaching in mainstream academia, and he just saw this system in place where people are trying to help, but the ways they end up trying to help get co-opted by commercial interests or the oil companies, or they're just incompetent. They can't see the bigger picture and they get invested. But, like, he's describing this process of taking oil out of the ground, making fertilizers and pesticides, GMO engineering corn and other crops to resist those pesticides, and, like, growing huge amounts of them and then turning them back into the oil
in order to refine it into oil
quality.
Right.
If we had just taken the oil from the ground originally, it would have made so much more sense.
Kind of reminds me of, like, the sand oil thing in Canada too, right?
It's killing the rivers. The effort to grow biofuels is dumping all these pesticides and fertilizers into our water because we're trying to grow huge amounts of plants. And
right.
So it makes no sense.
And part of the problem is supply and demand. I mean, we got everyone that wants to drive a car or get things that they want the next day, and that's part of our culture is we live with that situation and we pay the price for those things that we want. So if we want to change that culture, if we want to change that environmental cost, then we do need to look at, like, more integrative approaches to carbon emissions and fuel processing and fuel regenerative kinds of practices that kind of actually revitalize the earth and not just take things out from it. Yeah, and we're smart enough that we can do that now. That's the difference as opposed to a couple hundred years ago when people had, well, I mean, if you look at, like, horticultural practices and farming and things, there is so much more, you know, knowledge and science about how to do things in a way nowadays that don't just strip the soil of all the nutrients and then it's done in 10 or 20 years. You can actually do things in a way that you can regenerate that soil from year to year to year.
I laughed when you said we're smart enough now because
we should be.
There are certain cultures that were already that smart, like 10,000 years ago. Like they don't have to make all these mistakes and learn. Have agriculture that's sustainable. That's what they were already doing before we started meddling with everything.
Well, and
back to my original point. Like, trying to make things better, like grow more food, ends up creating more problems. Like now we have overpopulation.
Well, the perspective of today, it's like look at the perspective of, like, our cities and how we do transit and things like that. We're not living in small communities where everyone has 70 acres for farming. You know, that's just not the world we live in. You know, most people live in a city, you know, so you have to go to some kind of grocery store and trust that things are grown correctly and things are grown without use of heavy pesticides. And you got to trust these things. And to an extent, that's why we have systems set up that, you know, like the USDA that says, hey, you can't put that on a shelf if it's deemed unsafe to eat. And that goes into some of the canning stuff that I do, which is really, I could go on and on about that. But that's what I really like about preserving food is that you really get into the science of food. We could even jump base from the science of mycology and how that integrates with the science of soil to the science of, growing things like cucumbers and jalapenos and how you put those in a way that's less wasteful and getting more out of. So there's a lot of really cool things that are happening right now.
You do your own canyon. You feel like that's a good way to preserve the nutrition there?
Oh, for sure. And who doesn't like a good pickle? You know, that's I really enjoy pickles.
I think you talk to a lot of really health conscious people. They wouldn't tend to buy a lot of canned stuff in stores. Like, it's not generally it's the healthiest way to.
It always kind of like comes to me as like an old fashioned kind of thing to do, I guess, right? It's like,
no, you're doing it with your own stuff that you've grown yourself.
Yeah,
so it's a little different.
It's a little different. I feel like you know, I don't have anything against buying, like, if you got to buy peppers or tomatoes or whatever from the grocery store, like, you got to do what you got to do. If you can grow them, though, like, if you can grow certain things yourself, I think not only is it that much more rewarding, I think you get a lot more satisfaction out of it. And you can really, the more you do it, the better you get, like we were talking about with your last podcast. And you can really, really dive into like different flavor profiles of things that you like and really kind of pick and choose. Like,
yeah, totally.
You know, at this point in my gardening expertise, I've been doing it here for like, I don't know, 10 plus years. I really honed in on, I really like pickling cucumbers. You know, I really, you know, sure, the big ones that you slice and throw on salads are great, but I really do a lot of pickling because that's kind of like the demand. I make a lot of pickles and a lot of people ask me to make pickles for them.
Are they probiotic?
For sure, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fermentation process of pickling creates good bacteria and also helps your own digestive bacteria break down food. So it would help you break down additional food on top of things.
Are there ways in that process of making them where you can help determine the culture or the quality of the culture? That's a relatively new thing for people to think about.
You mean like a more potent probiotic versus another? Is that kind of what you're asking?
The types of, because there's different types of probiotics.
That's true. Yeah, there are different strains of probiotics, 100%, and there's a lot of different kinds of strains of probiotic. If you look at like a kombucha, you'll see different kinds of. You'll see like 4 or 5 different strains of probiotic.
So what the right ones that take in the right balance, like what that would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know a little bit about that. I'm not like a super expert on bacteria and probiotics to that extent. I know that there are billions of different kinds of probiotic cultures that will exist in something like that. So, I mean, you're getting lots of that when you drink a kombucha.
Something fascinating that I learned recently?
What's that?
People with depression have less diversity of bacteria, flora in their gut system.
Yeah.
People that are happier and more open-minded, I think that's correlated with that too, have a greater diversity.
Well, it so much has to do with, one, your like your physiological, like who you are and where you're coming from. And then it has to do with what you're eating. Yeah. So if you're eating nothing but like a processed situation of kind of food diet, then there's not a lot of probiotics left in processed foods. If you're eating an apple from a tree, well, there's going to be living bacteria in that apple that is good for you. Same with most live living things. When you get into fermentation, that's building good bacteria onto things. So probiotics are a really great way to build the gut system back up from this real harsh processed food culture that we've had in our lives for our entire life, really. I mean, we've always had that stuff as a part of our life. So when you can recognize that and start to get away from that, incorporate more things that are like, homegrown, local, fresh, you will in fact feel better. Your body will take in more of that and use it better.
Absolutely. Yeah, just reading, your gut microbes actually help your body to produce serotonin.
Exactly.
At the levels of the.
Exactly.
It's so amazing how our system is so complex and integrated, and how it's really not technically a wrong way to think about a single human individual person as being composed of like millions of different living like beings on some level, like bacteria that actually balance us, that are actually a part of us that we can't live without, and that our own moods and thoughts we have like 3 centers of neurons: our brain, which everyone knows about, but also our heart and our gut. Yeah. And that's the expression, like feeling it with your gut. Oh yeah. You're feeling something. There's information coming in on a feeling level that's not actually coming from the middle of our head. It's coming from like the bacteria in our gut and all other stuff, and our heart too.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know about how sensitive, you are or whoever, but like, I know when I eat like a fresh bowl of fruit or something, like, you feel a little bit better than if you went and ate like a donut.
Yeah.
It's just, there's something about it. And yeah, there's very impulsive ways of eating, and that's, that gets into a whole a whole discussion of diet and all that stuff, which we all have our...
I think to bring back to mushrooms...
Yeah.
Anyway. Mushrooms have a role to play in that too, balancing our...
yeah.
Filling that, like, certain nutrients.
Sure.
Our brain, talk about brain health. What about, like, you've gone out in the woods and found wild mushrooms and looked for them, harvested them. Have you been able to observe or get a sense of the network growing underneath the soil from doing that?
Oh, that's such a good point that you bring up. Yeah, I feel that's such a great point, because I really feel connected to the environment, especially when I go up north to Michigan and I do my morel hunting in the spring. That's something that you really feel a part of, because one, you're connecting with the trees and the soil and the dirt and the air and everything that's around you.
You're like listening.
You're listening. You're paying attention, and then there's this joke about mushroom hunters or morel hunters in the community, because they're really camouflaged. Like, if you don't know about them, they're really hard to find. I was out chanterelle hunting this summer here in Raleigh, and honestly, it was relatively pretty easy. Like, chanterelles are bright yellow and orange. They stick out. They're kind of easy to find. So it's like, you go out 5-10 minutes. It's like, there's a couple right there. Morel hunting, you can be out for a whole day or two looking for them before you find any. And a lot of people strike out. And so when you find something like morel mushrooms, it's really special, and you do feel a little bit of this connection, like you feel like the mushroom found you.
Oh, well.
Instead of maybe you finding it, it kind of found you.
Almost like a quality of surrender and just exploring and stumble across them.
And that's I think we talked about in the first one. It was kind of like the first time I found morels, I was really looking hard for them for a few days, and then I kind of stumbled on them. And I think that really, no matter how experienced you are or how new to it you are, or anything like that in terms of foraging, that kind of is how it happens. Like, sometimes you have some luck.
But what it makes me think about? If you weren't out looking for them, you wouldn't find them.
Yeah.
So, like, there's something so magical about trying to do something, even if you know your efforts are maybe not possible to actually create it, but, like, you're putting yourself in a mindset to open up to that possibility.
And that's, I think, for me, what was really special about morels was that, like, so first of all, you're out hiking on trails, and where I go hiking, there's a lot of different trails, there's a lot of different hiking areas, there's a lot of land areas up there. So the first question is like, well, where do you go? Where do you look? And, the thing with morels especially, one, back to what I was saying, is they're really hard they're kind of camouflaged, they're hard to find, but they do share a connection with the trees. So if you're out hunting in the middle of a pine forest, well, you're not going to find a lot, because they're not really connected to those. They're more connected with things like elm trees and aspen trees and maple trees and apple orchards and things like that. So there's an environmental aspect to it that once you start paying attention to that, it's like, oh, okay, now you're more connected. You've kind of plugged into what you're looking for. And for me, that sometimes takes a day or two.
Right.
If I go to an area and I'm just hiking around, kind of just, not really paying attention, it's like, it takes me a day or two to kind of really, really take in, okay, what kind of trees am I looking at? Am I looking at, like, hard soil? Am I looking at, a lot of pine straw? Am I looking at dunes, or like really wetland, kind of swampy area?
What are some of the different kinds of mushrooms you found?
So I think morels are the most fun ones that I really enjoy doing. I've found things like reishi. I have found oyster mushrooms. I have found, what else would we say? Turkey tail. I found a little bit of lion's mane. Nice. I found a bunch of other...
Have you ever seen a mushroom called chicken of the wood?
I have. I found chicken of the woods here in the neighborhood, yeah. That is a really funky mushroom. It's kind of like...
I ate one that we cooked it up.
Yeah.
I was in college, and we were out in the mountains. Someone found one and cooked it up, and it was amazing. It tasted just like chicken.
I bet it did. I bet it is. Yeah,
it was incredible.
Those are interesting ones. Those come around in usually the beginning to mid-fall. It's kind of like an orange looks like an orange, yellowy, almost, it kind of looks like a chicken fillet that's like sticking out of a tree.
Yeah.
And it's got these layers to it. So sometimes you get like a real big cluster of it that's like
they're big.
Like a few pounds, right?
It's fed 10 people.
Yeah. So that's the funny thing about mushrooms is like, you know, I'm sitting here going on about morels, and like I can go out for morels around here and like go out a whole day and find like 5. You know, like total.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if you go find something like a chicken of the woods like that, or like a hen of the woods, a maitake, which is another one that kind of looks like that. You know, you could find a good one that's 5-10 pounds. Yeah, that's a family dinner. You know, you got
cool to see that more available in stores. I've never seen that in the store.
There's a local grower. She is from Hillsborough, I want to say, but she grows maitake. You can sometimes find them at Whole Foods. But there's a grower that grows quote unquote wild mushrooms, right? So you got like lion's mane, maitake, oysters. Those are ones that you're going to find from trees.
Colorado that grows mushrooms.
Yeah, so a lot of those you can actually cultivate like right at home if you really want to. It's just a matter of like the medium that you're growing it on and how you grow it. Is what makes a big difference. I grow shiitakes here, but I like to grow them on logs. So I have these like inoculated logs that are buried out in the yard. So a few times a year they shoot out shiitakes, and it's kind of nice because I go out there and I garden, and then it's kind of this integrated mycelium network integrated into my garden. And so I've got like this kind of communication going back and forth between my garden plants, like my vegetables, along with this mushroom culture that I've been cultivating. And then what I'll do sometimes is take other mushroom compost and throw it into the garden as well. So a lot of times those scraps, or if I go out foraging, right, and I've got some scraps from those forages, I'll throw those into the garden because there might be some spores lying around on those, and that can integrate back and feed back into the ground, and then perchance start a new network. So there's some really, really cool things you can do.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just in your own garden, just to integrate mushrooms and kind of think about gardening in a more total kind of way with mycology too. So there's so many things you can do with it, you know.
I got another question for you that is a little bit different, but it's something I've thought about from time to time, and I want to investigate this and learn more about it. But it's more of an intuition I had a long time ago. Do you think like the way, like the mycelial network, the way that grows underground, it seems like it mirrors or has some, it seems so similar in just looking at it to the human nervous system and the way that fills up our body.
That's how I think of it sometimes. Like I feel like when I go out hunting for morels in northern Michigan, I'm out in the national park, right? So it's like this huge area. But when you find one, and then you find another, and then you find another, what happens is you start to kind of like make this thread, and you almost feel like you've hit a connection, or you've hit some kind of like thread in the network, and you're saying, okay, well, if I found one here, and then I'm going to find one all the way down the road the same way. And it's really interesting sometimes the way that the landscape looks. You can look at it like you can look at a ravine or a hillside, or just like kind of, or the patterns, right? Like I keep going to these similar places year after year and finding morels, not in the exact same place, but like down the road from that, or down the woods from that. You know, it's like it's like you're tapping into this network, and I feel like year after year I go back and I've hit this network that I've tapped, and it's like, aha, here I am again. And it's almost like nature is communicating with me. Nature is like saying, hey, we're here again. Here's your time. Like, this is the situation.
Right, you're a part of that network in a sense.
You're a part of it because you're there and you're present, and you're also looking for that. So, like, you're communicating back with nature. And I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot this past year, just being up there, especially with COVID and doing things, you know, having a lot of solitude through this whole COVID experience. Just like, man, like, what is nature trying to communicate back with us? And I think that's like, if you kind of sit still for a few minutes, nature is kind of talking to us if we listen, you know, and that's, to me, that's one of the best ways for me to kind of like connect back to that, is to go out in the woods and go on these hikes and to kind of just like, you know, take deep breaths and kind of like smell the air and kind of look at the trees, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you start learning about all the different mushrooms and the times of years that they come out. And then, it's cool because some of them are gourmet and taste really good, and some of them are medicinal, you know, so you have medicinal mushrooms that are good for your immune system and kind of build your building blocks of our system back to life, which is really cool because that means
where do morels fit into that picture?
Morels fit into a minor, well, I would say gourmet for sure. I mean, morels are more of a delicate kind of like a food, just like more of a very short window. I think the special thing about it for me is that it's such a short window. You have this 2 to 3 week period in the spring where they pop up and you're kind of looking for them in those certain networks that you've kind of found, and then they're gone. And then it takes a whole year of cycle for that thing to kind of come back again. And I like finding like things like oysters too, but honestly, like you can find oysters anywhere else.
They probably have some medicinal benefits.
There's some like levels of vitamins like iron and things like that, but it's not going to be like
it's not like lion's mane is good.
Yeah, like the lion's mane and turkey tail that has like beta glucans and things like that are really good for your immune system, and amino acids and things like that break down and help your body recover. That's exactly why these companies are making like immune system mushroom powders and things like that you'll see at like Whole Foods. It's like it's because they work and they're good for you.
The other thing I was thinking about, like the human nervous system, and then of course the internet, and it's like a network of information that's non-centralized, distributed network of information. I think our human nervous system is like that, but what happens is we tend to think that it's centralized, and we create, this ego, this sense of yourself that's kind of small and fixated, and this is who I am. I think that is like the psychological process of trying to centralize what is actually a decentralized intelligence network where information is being widely shared throughout your whole body and nervous system. And the mycelial networks, the mushrooms are sharing information with the nature, and then the internet is like that too. But we see places like China or whatever powerful companies, they try to grab a hold of a piece of it and try to control it and centralize it. But the healthy system, I think, understands that it's more than any given part, and that it's decentralized, that all the information is valid and important. All the parts of ourselves should be able to talk and listen to each other.
I think nature is underestimated. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, you got these companies that are like, hey, we're in charge of everything, and we rule everything in the world, and everything lives and dies by our dollar. But it's like
pride.
Yeah, but it's like seriously though, like the nature really rules at the end of the day. I mean, we're living day to day trying to keep our bodies warm and fed and nourished, and we're doing all of these things and buying these products and doing these things in order to do that.
Yeah.
So the more it's like. It's like people talk about like flow, like you talk about like being in flow.
Yeah,
that's been a real thing. Like a lot of people have been trying to plug into. It's like, well, it is kind of being in flow with nature if you are kind of being present. And I've been thinking a lot about that too, just being like really present minded and trying to focus on like not necessarily the past or the future, but just kind of like that moment in that kind of space.
Right. Yeah, there's a few words that have taken on more and more meaning for me over the years, like being present moment,
right.
Also surrender and acceptance, or maybe present moment, acceptance, and surrender, like a letting go of trying to keep track of everything, a letting go of trying to control everything, a letting go of trying to manipulate things that be a certain way.
Yeah.
Like that's flow to me.
Well, we certainly have agendas, right? Like we have, like, what do we want to do or where we want to go and like who we talk to and who we see. But then there's like a certain level of like uncertainty to it too. Like you kind of go out and find these things or do these things and you don't really know maybe what's around the corner. And I think that's really, I mean, it's like, we could go on about like expand on that, but it's, there is, I think it is important to kind of be in the present moment, especially when you're trying to connect with nature. I think that's kind of one of those things to try to, because that's what nature is. Nature is this present moment. I just got back from Michigan to this little trip up there, and it was like, I've never seen it in the fall, and it was so rewarding to see these really vibrant leaves and golden colors, and then it kind of turned into this winter snowy landscape, and it was like I never had seen it like that in the fall, and it was really rewarding to me just to kind of like take that experience in and to like add it to this like book that I have of memories, and just to say like, wow, that was really, really special. And then the weather lended itself to some really interesting situations with photography and hiking and wildlife and things like that, and you just kind of pull back a little bit and realize the bigger picture.
It's beautiful. I mean, in terms of nature, I'm just thinking about like, we're a part of nature.
Yeah.
Whatever we build is a part of nature. I think that's an important perspective for me to come back to.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day who is seeing, like, they actually help, like, people have a lot of anxiety and fear about global warming and about the environmental crises, and it's actually taking a toll on our mental health. And,
it is.
I mean, it's good to want to help things and do better, but it's not good to live in a state of anxiety and fear around things that you can't control, you don't really understand, and that no one really knows what's going to happen.
You're right.
So, like,
To panic is not really, I don't think that's the answer right now. I think there is a lot of anxiety. I think anxiety is really high for a lot of reasons. Global warming is a really good reason to be anxious because we see it more often as the years go on. We have really...
Well, it's like, it's good to talk about and good to try to understand and try to do the best that we can do, make things better, but I don't think anxiety itself or a lot of worry or fear or sense of nihilism or hopelessness like that, those kinds of things aren't helpful. No,
you're right. Yeah, I don't think that's a hopeful thing. I think there are, I mean, that's the thing is I'm hopeful because there are, like, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of smart people alive right now, and if there's like, if there's any changes or science or things that can be done, I mean, there's probably people doing it. I'm not out there doing all of those things, right? Like, I'm a very small part of it, and I think that's part of the reason that sometimes people do feel hopeless is when you look at the grand scale of how individual we are. It's like, wow, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and I'm just one person. What am I going to do to change anything?
That's where I come back to surrender, and we're actually a part of nature, and there's something bigger, there's bigger things happening than human beings, and that can actually help to take some of the pressure off.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you should trust, like, I mean, it's hard to, that's a really good way to put it. I don't really want to add to that. That's good.
I want to find a way to advocate for environmentalism and doing the right thing and figuring this stuff out as best we can. Yeah. But that also helps to take away some of the nihilism and hopelessness and despair and like the doomsaying, because I don't want to believe in that, actually. I don't believe that we're fucked. I think that the natural systems are going to, like, there's so much intelligence in the earth that can handle and deal and respond to things.
Well, and that's kind of why I keep talking about, like, man, like, knowledge is power, because, like, the more, I've been, I guess you'd say, like, doing mycology, foraging, so to speak, I don't know, 5 years now, 6 years. So it's kind of like so much knowledge has been gained in that time frame, and there's so much more still to be learned. And so, like, there's an incredible amount of information that is out there for people to learn. And I think, like, to me, that's really powerful, because you realize that you are part of the system, but, like, we aren't fucked. Like, you've got like some hope in this world, and there's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, it's not about, like, everybody doing their own thing and, the sum total of that, but it's like there's this integrative connectedness that we have that you can really do some interesting things if we focus on it.
Absolutely.
So, and there's a lot of time to do that too. We're all, now is the time with all the technology that we have and the science and ways that we can calculate information and look at statistical things and analyze things. Yeah. It's like, man, it's really cool. I mean, that just with, like, foraging alone, I can make a map of, like, where I'm finding things or when I'm finding them, or, like, how many I find. There's things like that are so important that have not been done. There's so much information, like you were saying with mycology. Like, there's so much out there that there's not a lot of people doing that right now. So there's a lot of science that's still out there. So that's one area of things that I've been kind of delving into is things that are kind of, like, worthwhile for humans that you might not think about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
That fungal network really has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and it's curating information across vast distances and spaces and helping these ecosystems to be balanced. And
for sure.
I wonder if, like, the human internet is connecting all of humanity pretty much, and eventually, like,
it's a good way to think of it.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's, like, an impulse within life itself to connect and expand these networks of information that could eventually extend beyond our planet, but that these networks could eventually like interconnect with each other. Like this fungal network that covers all of the planet. Like maybe one day our internet will somehow connect with that internet, because that's like the nature of internet. It's like already there.
That's what God, what is it like the not is it the new Star Wars or something about the news? Because I think Paul Stamets was like talking to the new Star Wars creators. I think there's some mycelial network that they travel through. There's something to that.
Talk about something
they do something. There's something I haven't seen it, but there's something that to that level where they're like, well, they're time traveling through this like mycelial network through space, and it's like that's kind of far out there.
It's kind of far out, but I wonder if there's actually networks like that already exist, so we don't have to create them. We can discover them, and they already exist between planets.
Oh, that's
I wonder if it's happening on the level of life itself. That all life throughout the universe is actually connected in some weird way that we don't understand.
Well, look at what we're doing in just the last. I mean, like, look at what we've done in our life. We've gone to Mars, and we've sent telescopes to the far ends of the galaxy, right? And we've taken pictures and sent those pictures back, and we can look at them. Yeah. So we can look at ourselves.
That's really changed our collective consciousness, the ability to see ourselves from space.
It's wild.
It's a beautiful.
And what you're looking at from space is not like this present moment. You're looking at like light years ago. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at way, way, way long ago things that have happened. So it's really interesting that we can identify that and actually like observe that as a species. I mean, that in itself is incredible.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we can send people, or I should say, we can send drones to somewhere like Mars and then ride around and collect information. I mean, that's going to really expand our knowledge on other planets just in general, because we're all made up of the same things. Like we are all made up of carbon. We are all made up of the same elements, right?
I wonder the distances are so far, it's hard to imagine that we'll be able to cross them physically. That's why I think there has to be some kind of network that is in some other dimension, or...
Well, and what would be the purpose, I guess? Like, are we looking for like another Earth-like planet? Because I don't think there's one that's ever going to be approachable from like, from our vantage point, but it could exist.
I feel like the purpose is just to like wake up more and more deeply on more and more levels to the universe, like as it already is.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we should try to like go to other planets and stuff. I think that's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think we should be more in tune and harmony with this planet.
Like going back to the moon. Like that's kind of like, well, we've been there.
I just don't think we should use our resources to try to establish colonies.
Right.
In another planet.
Well, if it
could become self-sustaining, maybe. But
that's what scares me about these companies that are doing these, because it almost seems like now it's like this corporate enterprise. It's like, all right, now like Amazon and Bezos, and they're going to start building their own like space stations and things like that. I mean, they've already got satellites and all that stuff, but it kind of gets into dangerous territory with like, okay, who controls space and like all that technology that's floating around out there. And I guess the space station almost had a close call recently, where like some debris was flying by and they had to kind of take precautions. But anyway, we're kind of getting off. But it's a really interesting topic. I mean, I think there's a lot of information to be learned about space. I think there's still tons of stuff to be learned right here, just like right in front of us. And again, like we can all like individually take it upon ourselves to learn things like that. I mean, I like to go. Just looking back at like this past fall up north, it was like, man, it was really cool to just be able to spot trees from like a mile away. I was like, okay, there's some aspen trees.
You can identify them?
Yeah. And I'm so used to doing it in the spring when things are budding and then there's no leaves on it, and I'm looking for mushrooms, and you're kind of looking for the tree bark and all these different identifiers. But then in the fall, you're seeing all the end result of this cycle that's beautiful, and you're like, oh wow, man, look at these maple trees and look at these aspens, and like it's really interesting to kind of see how beautiful this whole thing is. And
aspen is another tree that is connected underground and grows for miles and miles. And I've seen huge stands of them.
I mean, these root systems talk to each other, and that's how they create these forests and ecosystems, and it's really crazy if you think about how short we're here compared to how long some of these systems are kind of been viable. So that's again, it kind of is why I like to go mushroom hunting, is because it's like this cyclical thing where it's like every single spring I know, nature is going to provide this kind of experience if I go out there and make myself exist out there. So it's really,
put yourself in that place.
If I put myself in that place, it will be there. Now, you can't guarantee success or whatever, right? Sometimes, that's the whole fun of it, is that sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not. But that's what cultivating is a lot of fun about, because you have a lot more control on things like that. So if you want to grow your own oysters or what have you, you can, do it at home and, or start them in your garden bed, and it's a little bit more reliable in that kind of sense. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot to be said about integrating all that stuff into your garden and kind of doing things on your own and growing your own stuff. And
do you feel like healthier, happier getting stuff in the garden?
100%, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's when you get away. When you start getting away, like, it's kind of like I don't drink soda anymore, and I don't really ever think about it, because I don't really, but it's like one of those things that if you drink it a lot, you're craving it. But then when you kind of get away from it a little bit, you realize you're like, wait, I feel way better if I don't drink like a half cup of sugar.
There's actually research showing that a lot of processed foods, like things like Doritos and
sure,
it has the effect of reducing your sensitivity. So if you're someone who eats those things regularly, you become accustomed to them and they taste good to you. But if you stop for a while and taste them again, they actually don't taste good.
Well, and
you're able to taste other foods like stir fries or salads or whatever you're eating, like real cooked food. Yeah. You can actually taste them. They actually taste different.
I think that's the problem with living in a city, is like, when you live somewhere like downtown or wherever, it's like, a lot of these areas don't have fresh food availability right there. Like, yeah, you can drive to a grocery store and get stuff like that. But yeah, you do feel better eating fresh food as opposed to processed stuff. Your body responds to it better. It breaks it down better. And again, with something that has probiotics in it, it's actually going to break it down better, absorb it better, and you use it better in terms of energy and make you feel better. You're not going to spend your body's energy trying to process something that shouldn't be there to begin with.
Right.
And again, like, you're building that connection with nature. So it's like, yeah, it's a lot easier in some regards when I'm up there, if I can forage my own things or like grow my own things. It's like, yeah, it's a lot easier to feel that way as opposed to being in a city where you might have to just kind of deal with something that's more processed or like going maybe with less choices or something that's more convenient just because of the fact of the matter. It's hard. I think that's the problem that we live in our culture. It's like we've been kind of force fed all this stuff. The second you turn on a TV or a radio or something, you start getting advertisements. So if you're on the internet, you get advertisements for all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to fight our brains and train our. It's like talking about discipline and stuff. It's almost like it takes discipline to like really say like, no, I'm not going to go stop at this place or wherever and get takeout. I'm going to make something at home that might be more wholesome and take more time.
Often things like that take discipline, especially at first, but then over time you establish a new habit. And like I'm saying,
it's a habit kind of thing.
You pay attention to what actually feels good and what you actually want.
Yeah.
When that shifts, that's when the real change is made, because you actually want things that nourish you, and then it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think again, like when you feel your body respond, you're like, man, I'm feeling a lot better when I eat something like that. And it's like, oh wow, like yeah.
It makes me think of these like information systems we're talking about. Like having healthy food is obviously super important, but then the knowledge and the felt embodied knowledge of what that actually is.
Yeah.
Then in the information space, to kind of jump to that, the internet connecting us, it's our media plays this big role, obviously, of communicating to all the people that are plugged in.
Sure.
And that's where like our information ecosystem's gotten so messed up, especially in the last few years, and things have gotten so distorted, and it's becoming toxic. It's becoming a toxic soup. And I think part of the toxicity is what I was talking about when someone tries to have centralized control. You have 4 or 5 media companies that control like 90% of the media on planet Earth, or at least in this country. They're trying to centralize their control, and then there's all these reactions happening against it. That's why people are complaining about the mainstream media all the time. The mainstream media has become so limited and so centralized, and that's contributing to the toxicity.
Well, it's like this storyline. It's like, we don't all follow along the same storyline that's put out there. It's like just because there's a headline of something, and it's like that really doesn't mean it's relevant to what's going on in our day. You know,
it doesn't, and it probably incites anxiety and fear, and it brought on as like painting what is a complex situation in a very simplistic narrative.
That's completely true, and like we were talking about, there's a ton of situations. I'd say most situations are more complex than what's on the surface of that headline. So it is hard it's so easy because we have these phones in our pockets, and it's so easy to just say, hey, let me go check this, really quick, any given time. And it is harder to, I would say, hold your judgment and say maybe there's more to the story than I'm reading here. Right. That's harder than I think it really seems sometimes, because we read something and we just take it as face value, and that it is what it is, and it's like, that might not be true at all. So we're talking about these like court cases and stuff going on, and it's like, man, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So especially with like the vaccines and all that. I mean, it's the evolution of,
it's like highly charged topics that become polarized and politicized.
Yeah, I mean that's like I'd say that's like the crescendo of everything since the last 4 years of, the last president, into the election, into all that stuff, and then feeding into this year with the pandemic, and it's like it's just the evolution of all that stuff into today. Yeah. So in some ways it's not surprising that here's where we are. It's disappointing that our culture feels like, I feel like we should be ahead of where we are in terms of like how quick we are to be angry and polarized and not understanding of other people.
It's like we're devolving, but
it's hard.
That's what the problem is. That's the picture the media is actually painting. When I talk to people individually, I realize that most people are not like that.
Yeah.
Most people actually are capable of complex, nuanced thoughts and
for sure
considering empathy and thinking about things. And it's actually the kind of storylines that we get fed that like make us stupider sometimes.
Well, there's still a lot of like, just with like the vaccination thing, for example, there's still a lot of back and forth about like, should we be doing this? Should we be wearing masks? Should we be congregating? So it's hard to make. I feel like our society, like our decision making has been somewhat clouded because there's just so much kind of thrown out there that in a normal time we could say, yeah, pretty black and white, you should do this or do that. And right now there's still kind of like, I know people that are like, I'm not particularly resistant to people who are not vaccinated. I've kind of been like, well, that's their choice at this point. If they don't want to be vaccinated, that's up to them. That's their risk. Right. But I know people who are very strictly saying like, I don't want to be around or in the presence of people who are not vaccinated. And it's like, okay, well, what length are we going to take this to?
This is going to sound odd or surprising, but I literally got a text message yesterday from someone who's throwing a big event near Boulder in Colorado, and they texted me, we decided to not allow vaccinated people at our event.
Oh wow, that's wow.
Unvaccinated people.
Wow.
Which to me is the most absurd, ridiculous. I mean, this person has gone down the QAnon conspiracy theory rabbit hole a while ago, and they are so anti-vaccine that they actually don't want to be around people who've taken a vaccine, which to me is a level of arrogance and stupidity that boggles the mind. But I also agree with what you're saying. Everyone should have the choice to take a vaccine or not. We should avoid these extremes of thinking that anyone who's made any given choice is in some way, stupid or crazy or wrong, because I think we should respect people's individual choices, but to try to like the way that this, honestly, I've never seen anything be so divisive in communities that I'm a part of as this vaccine issue, because some people are so passionately against it. It's almost like a religious fervor, and I get where they're coming from often, and they often have, I'm someone who studied the history of the pharmaceutical companies in this country. They're horrible, like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Purdue Pharma. There's a lot of reasons to distrust these huge pharmaceutical companies. They haven't always acted in our best interests. They have a tremendous profit motive. They care more about the bottom line and their stock price than they do about helping people often, and that's terrible, and we need to change that. But the vaccine shouldn't be this thing that is like, you're trying to like form a different camp, and you don't want to like hang out with someone because they're I think that's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking. Okay, so we did our podcast last November, Thanksgiving, and the vaccine hadn't come out yet to the public, right? So you didn't have public availability, and everyone was kind of like, we need the vaccine, we want the vaccine, and now the vaccine's available. I was lucky to be in healthcare, so I was still one of the first people to get it. So I'm like, cool, I'm ready to move on.
Did you notice any ill effects?
No, none at all. I'm
vaccinated as well.
I didn't. The very first one, I had a very mild effect, but that's very typical. It seems like most people have that. But it's just interesting that we've kind of evolved to this point now where it's like, not only is there plenty available and we're trying to get people on board with it, but I mean, I'm not the person that goes out. I don't go out with the vaccine or anything. I don't have anything to do with it, but I'm vaccinated, and I think I would advise anyone to get the vaccine. I think it's a perfectly safe thing, in my opinion, based on what I know and my relative
based on
knowledge.
Everyone's making choices based on the information they have and the information they believe.
Yeah, and I respect. I'm not going to go call anybody out that doesn't want to get it. That's kind of the thing that is hard to, I think, for some people to get their head around, is that it's like, if you don't get it, that's fine. I think that's like your choice. I don't think the government should make you get it, but I feel like there are, if you're like a private company or there's certain settings where you have to be vaccinated or show proof of vaccination, I don't have any issue with that either. I think that's fine. Like I went to some concerts and then, they made you show vaccinations. And it's like, that's fine. Why not?
Solution. It still gives someone a choice, but it allows people who want to get together that option to do that. I mean, if someone wants to go to the concert and they don't want to get the vaccine, I understand that sucks, but there should be a medical exception to things like that, because some people have a valid medical reason to not get vaccinated. It's not just their personal choice. Yeah, and that's fine, and that's the same. I'm not that kind of but to have a party that's strictly for non-vaccinated people is a little. I don't know how responsible that is. I'm seriously debating making that Instagram, Facebook post like mocking this, maybe calling it out. But I'm pretty sure that other people involved in this fairly large event that features multiple artists aren't on board with what he's saying. But he's the person who founded and created it. He's like the main organizer of it. So for him to personally message me because he knows I'm vaccinated and try to kind of get a dig at me, I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Yeah. Do you have any last words that kind of? Oh man, stay safe out there, man. It seems like it's kind of a still an uncertain time, but I'm glad to see it. It sounds like we're still safe and hanging in there and trucking along, and you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and it's great to catch up on the year. It's like our annual review of the year, I think. Yeah, and you're saying it's been a really good year for you. It's been a great year, yeah. In terms of aside from the pandemic and some other, things in my life that happened, I think there's some really great. I think this has been a really great positive year for me, and it's been really uplifting and. Yeah, I think the whole COVID thing is a chance to hit the reset button and reevaluate your life and start to co-create, for so many people, discover the life that you really want to be living and go do it and go live it and go be it. You can't take things for granted. And that's what we're talking about. It's like if you want to stay at home and socially isolate all the time, that's the best choice for you. Like more power to you. But if you want to go out, explore, do new things, live the life, whatever it is, I think now's the time to do it too. Yeah, I think keep learning is my kind of thing right now. Is like keep learning, and I think the more you learn, the more power you're going to gain, and that gives you so much more freedom to make the right choices and to go forward with your life. Yeah. So yeah, man, it's great to catch up and kind of like reevaluate and touch base on the world and kind of. It's always fun to talk mushrooms, and I'm always happy to do it. And I was pleased with our last conversation, looking at 2020 from the back porch. Got a lot of views and listens, and 2020 was such an epic year, and you were in an unusual position, seeing all the protests and going by your front door. And, things have quieted down, but it's almost like the calm before the next storm. And the next storm might be uglier than the last, but let's enjoy the calm while it's here. There's still some small fires, let's put it that way. There's still some small fires that are out there that are happening. I saw this huge black truck yesterday here in Raleigh, North Carolina on the highway with a giant bumper sticker that said, "Biden is not my president." Okay. Yeah. Have you seen the gas station stickers? The people have been doing that too. People have been putting these stickers on gas stations. I don't know, it's pretty wild. But, it's to be expected. What is the sticker?
Oh, like blaming Biden for that he has this I did that thing that he's
the price of gas.
The price of gas is going up. Yeah. And which what if it goes down? Then you're going to take those stickers off, I guess.
It's interesting to me that the price of gasoline being this big political issue actually feels old-fashioned. That was like the George Bush era, the Clinton era.
Yeah, it does.
The Tesla, the like really rich tech cool people, they don't even care what the price of gas is.
No, not at all.
So to like say that like Biden's going to lose the presidency because the price of gas went up, it's like go back to 1995 or something.
Yeah, it's like
we don't need to go to war in Iraq in 2001 to like get more gasoline in our gas tanks.
Right.
That's 2002 we actually went to war.
That's what I'm saying. We need to.
I'm just like tired of that. I'm like, stop talking about gas prices. Just go buy a better car. Why are you driving a truck that can like, fit like my entire extended family in the back half of it? And you're like one little pissed off white dude in the front seat.
Right. There are a lot of trucks out on the road. I mean, there's a lot of trucks.
10 miles a gallon somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is you can't. You're right to complain about gas prices goes down when you drive a huge truck that eats 10 miles a gallon. That's. That's a. I mean, again, it kind of we live in this freedom place that you can choose that if that's what you want to drive, you can drive that, right?
Yeah, but it's not just about what you're driving and choosing. It's like you can just feel the mindset, like the mindset of like blaming politicians for the price of gas while you're driving a huge truck. It's just a certain like.
Well, I mean, if you're doing serious construction work or you're really using that truck to like haul stuff around, then like by all means, like do what you got to do, but like. There's a reason I don't drive a huge truck like that. I don't need that kind. I don't do that kind of thing. So,
I just think that the price of things like that should actually have. You should actually have to feel the impact of it. If you're burning a bunch of gas, that's kind of an impact in the world we live in. You should have to pay a little bit more money, hopefully, to help clean it up somewhere down the line. That would be my ideal system. I know that doesn't happen today, but
that goes into social responsibility, and that goes into should we have those kind of things in place?
You have a right to pollute the air. How much and when does that right end?
Right, exactly. Yeah, we could definitely go into that one. That goes into a lot of different things. Next time, yeah, for sure. That's a lot of areas. Yeah, I'm glad you came by, and safe travels. Hope you don't get stuck in the airport like it sounds like you did, and slightly for a minute in Vegas.
I have the seat number. It should be good.
Yeah, let's hope so. All right, man. Safe travels.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found value in this podcast, there are many ways you can support it, and one of the easiest and best is to just share it with friends, family, and post about it on your own social media accounts. That really helps the podcast a lot. You can leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts and now on Spotify Podcasts. And of course, you can join our Patreon community, patreon.com/astateofmind, where you will receive access to guided meditations from me, additional music and artwork, other goodies that are in the works. So check that out. And learn more about my work as a therapist and meditation teacher at astateofmindcounseling.org. Thank you so much, and I will see you here next time.